The dark days when arguments were settled with a smoking gun have returned to Portadown.
We have to live with this the rest of our lives and try to go on, but it's a nearly impossible situation. I just want people to realise what Richard was trying to do and stop all this. His life has been taken away because of this, and people need to see this for what it is.
The family are very shocked at what has happened, and understandably so. And I was very glad I had the opportunity of coming and offering my condolences to them, because we all hoped that we'd seen the end of this. And regrettably, there are some people, as yet we do not know who, but there are some people who don't want it to end.
The LVF are responsible for my brother's death, because the Sunday night before, the week before that, I was wakened by the police at 2 o'clock in the morning and told there's a serious threat on the Jamesons from the LVF.
Whoever carried out this attack within the LVF did it deliberately to try and provoke people in the UVF to actually take action against the LVF.
There are reports of prominent loyalists basically increasing their own personal security, monitoring their own movements, and basically staying close to the ground.
46-year-old Richard Jameson was ambushed as he returned to his isolated home at Derry-Leddiff Road. A gunman fired through the passenger window of his car. He was hit at least 4 times. Maura Jameson, who met her husband when she was 15, was first on the scene. She speaks here for the first time.
I had his dinner on and I heard this bang. I thought it was a car actually backfiring. And then I just looked out the window and saw the shadow, and I thought, it can't be, it's nothing. It's just somebody running down the road, you know. And then as I went out the door, the light was on in the Jeep, as if Richard was getting out. And then it just all happened then, you know.
The tension between the rival LVF and the UVF, especially in Portadown, has reached breaking point. What began as verbal abuse and fistfights has culminated in murder, with the LVF issuing a direct challenge to the UVF ceasefire. Tonight, Spotlight examines just why Richard Jameson was killed and asks if the feud within Loyalism can be contained or is likely to spiral out of control. Portadown is synonymous with sectarian strife. Drumcree has long been a symbol of division, with the parade's issue polarising the nationalist and unionist communities. Now the axis of division has temporarily shifted and is running through the heart of Loyalism. With the IRA on ceasefire, the rivalry between Loyalist paramilitaries has intensified.
Before the ceasefire situation, there was, if you like, the enemy out there in a sense, and now that there is a new situation upon the province and so on, the Loyalist family seems to have fractured in the Mid-Ulster area, and that is, no doubt about it, that seems to be very, very hard.
It was widely reported that Richard Jameson was a victim of an internal Loyalist feud. Within hours of his death, security and Loyalist sources were describing him as the UVF's brigadier in Mid-Ulster, and the maverick Loyalist Volunteer Force was being blamed for the murder.
We thought the days of this shooting was over. We've all lived through a bad 30 years, and we're hanging on to what the peace process is at the minute. It mightn't be very stable, but at least everybody's holding on to it. And we thought the days of shooting was over. And this is why it's such a shock today.
Why did they pick on the Jameson family?
Well, there could be a number of reasons. These people try to intimidate young people. They use young people, they ruin their lives, and they would know the Jameson family would be against us.
Richard Jameson, seen here second from the right, was from a large family of 9 children, 5 boys and 4 girls. The 5 Jameson brothers and their mother have all served in the security forces.
The Jameson family are well known in this town, and they are local businessmen who have made a significant contribution to the town, and I think we should leave it at that.
Perhaps unusually for a committed Loyalist, Richard Jameson had a passion for the Irish Republic. The tranquility of summers in the south was in sharp contrast to events at Drumcree. He was a frequent visitor to County Galway, holidaying at his brother's house in Roundstone on the edge of an Irish-speaking district, the Connemara Giltocht. On his death, people from Roundstone sent letters of sympathy. But in a particularly callous manner, so too did his killers. His 11-year-old daughter, Kirsty, opened the envelope.
You just think this is going to be a sympathy card, but it wasn't. It was just a really sick, really disgusting thought, you know, that somebody could gloat at something like this, that had happened. And we were all, I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that somebody could sit down and write this here.
And what did they write? What did it say?
It said, "A professional job well done," in capital letters, addressed to the Jameson family.
And you just lost your husband. Then this letter arrives, or this card. I mean, what sort of people would do something like that?
You just, there must be some, they're sick. The scum, sick. There's no words to describe people like that, I don't think. They must have no upbringing, they must have no morals, or they just must be so low life. It's hard to think that anybody could do such a thing.
Richard Jameson was a leading light in the community. Many believe his influence came in part from his UVF connections, having been hand-picked to pull dissidents into line.
When it emerged that Richard Jameson had been shot as part of the Feud, I don't think it came as much surprise to people in the nationalist community in Portadown, because Richard Jameson for many years had been known to have fairly strong loyalist connections.
Richard was never in a police station in his life, never interviewed, and never brought in to be interviewed or charged in any one way at all. And I don't even think he'd ever been at a motoring offence. So for people to make the statement, and it was very hurtful to the family.
A sea of people packed the country roads leading to the Turtaran parish church outside Portadown for his funeral, one of the largest seen here for years. Mourners arrived by coachload from across Northern Ireland and as far away as Scotland to show their support. Before the funeral, one of the brothers said there would be no paramilitary trappings. This was welcomed by the local vicar.
I certainly wouldn't want to have been associated with anything of that nature, so I was naturally relieved that there was the case, yeah. And I think it's also a sign perhaps that we are moving on, at least from the past, and there is a desire for a new future, an inclusive desire, hopefully, for the good of all of the people in the community that will set the past behind and will move forward.
While overt paramilitary trappings were absent, there were, however, some discreet signs which pointed to Richard Jameson's past, such as Loyalist and UVF ties on some of the mourners. It was clear from the scores of death notices that he was well connected in Loyalist circles. Loyalist leaders, including David Irvine and Gary McMichael, posted personal death notices. There were also messages from UVF prisoners in the Maze and McGabry. Jameson had liaised closely on how to deal with the threat posed to the UVF by the LVF. His views carried weight, a fact reflected by messages of sympathy from prisoners' groups and the entire PUP party structure.
The only things that I ever heard Richard Jameson talking about was how peace could be kept in Portadown, and he was also opposed to people taking action against the LVF, physical action. He was always one who wanted to talk these things through, and for long years since the LVF had been in existence, and even before that when Billy Wright was there, he was always someone who said that dialogue was the best way forward.
So it's immaterial whether he was a UVF brigadier or not. That's the point you're making?
Well, the point I'm making is that he was an innocent person who was murdered cowardly on his way home to his wife and children, home from a day's work. And I think that that's what people need to focus on. I think in many ways what the police have done by claiming and alleging that Richard was a UVF commander is in some way justify the murder of Richard Jameson. And I think that that is totally unfair.
The presence at the funeral of the political representatives of the party closest to the Ulster freedom fighters, David Adams and Gary McMichael of the Ulster Democratic Party, sent a clear message of disapproval to the LVF from the largest loyalist paramilitary group. Since the funeral, the Jameson family has taken to the streets of Portadown to eradicate any mention of the LVF. This has earned Bobby a death threat as the surviving brothers go about defacing LVF graffiti. Bobby Jameson says exposing the LVF as a gang of criminal drug dealers and bringing his brother's killers to justice within the law has become the sole focus of his life.
We have a pain within us. We're hurting inside for what happened to Richard. And if we can get rid of that pain and help to clean up Portadown, everything we do, we want to be for the good of Portadown. And we feel that these people are now coming in and they're going to ruin society. They're going to ruin not only this generation but the generations to come unless they're removed out of Portadown.
The security forces over the years weren't able to stop the LVF. I mean, how can one family realistically plan or hope to stop them?
We could do that. We have to try. If you don't try, you know, if you don't try something, you don't know you're going to succeed or not. You know, you have to try. You must try. If you don't try, like, what are you here for? Like, you're wasted. My brother's life's wasted there. You know.
By murdering Richard Jameson, the LVF has attacked one of the most powerful families in Portadown. From solid working class origins, the Jamesons have moved on, acquiring wealth and status. Two of the brothers run building companies which handle lucrative contracts for the security forces. Bobby is one of the few businessmen in Northern Ireland still receiving police protection. Despite their affluence, they have never forgotten their roots in the tough housing estates of Portadown or their identification with loyalism. Just how close that identification once was is something they're keen to play down as they concentrate on facing down the LVF. You yourself were a victim of some sort of attack, weren't you, at some point? What happened to you?
Yeah, that was an IRA caravan. Due to carrying out work for security forces. So our family suffered enough. Didn't think we'd have to suffer again.
David Jameson lost a leg in the attack 9 years ago. He had just driven off from his Portadown home when a bomb ripped through his vehicle. At the time, the IRA claimed he was a member of the UVF and was carrying out building work for the security forces. The family firmly denied the allegations. What is less well known is that David has a criminal conviction, having used his personal protection weapon while in the UDR to hijack a motorcycle. At his trial, David was also convicted of lending his UDR gun to members of the UVF who used it to carry out armed robberies. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison.
Was Davy ever in jail?
My brother, yes, he was in jail, that's right.
What for?
I need to think about this. That's right. Yeah, I know what he was in jail for now. My brother, he was in jail, not too sure, it was a good while ago. He hijacked a vehicle one time. And he got, I think he got 3 years. It's a long, long time ago. He was about 18 at the time, so it's 20 years ago.
So he was involved at some point?
Well, again, at that age, 17, 18, he was used by older men, and as I say, he did hijack a vehicle one time when that was the sort of racketeering and things that were going on.
David Jameson's building business grew during the 90s with the help of security force contracts, and Richard was made a director. The contracts were awarded in spite of the fact that the company was being run by a disgraced UDR man, and a co-director who's now been named by security sources as being a leading member of the UVF. On the day he was murdered, Richard was carrying out a building contract inside the Ballykinler Army Base in County Down. Individuals or companies seeking access to the base must first fill in a Ministry of Defence questionnaire. It states, "The purpose of such checks is to prevent those who may have connections with terrorist organisations or who may be vulnerable to pressure from such organisations from gaining access to certain posts. Examination of criminal records is a feature of a security check, and other security checks may be carried out as necessary."
I think it raises a number of questions. First of all, you know, for security sources to say that Richard Jameson was the UVF commander in this area makes one ask, you know, why this man was never charged with any of his activities over the years, why he was never arrested over the years. And it also brings into focus why a company of which this man was a director could, you know, very easily get their hands on contracts and security work within RUC and British Army installations in various parts of the north.
When asked to comment, the Army told Spotlight that it does not discuss individual contractors who work for the security forces. Stuart Jameson is an identical twin of his dead brother. He's a prominent publican and is also determined to expose the LVF as drug dealers.
These people are not loyalists, they're just masquerading as loyalists. I think their loyalty is drugs, money and power. And our country's going to have a real problem with them. They don't stand them out now before they get too big and nobody can go near them.
Stuart Jameson has also been in the public eye. 10 years ago, he was charged in relation to one of Ireland's biggest art thefts. The paintings worth millions were taken from Selbridge in County Kildare. A group of men were arrested at an hotel near Heathrow Airport in connection with the theft. Named on the charge sheet for conspiring to handle stolen paintings was Stuart Jameson. The case against all the men was later dropped, and Stuart remains innocent of all charges.
There were some stolen paintings. I'm not too sure of the details of it, but there were some stolen paintings that somehow he was involved in, or alleged to be involved in, because the charges were dropped at the time. So there was really nothing. He was alleged to have been involved in stolen paintings, but as I say, there's no charges brought. And that's, again, it must be 12, 15 years ago.
Bobby is the brother's spokesman. He is the vice chairman of Portadown Football Club. He too has a building company employing about 100 men. He wants the community in Portadown to unite with the family to rid the town of the LVF by peaceful and legal means. The notorious Portadown loyalist Billy Wright formed the breakaway LVF in 1996. While the mainstream paramilitaries went on ceasefire, the LVF went on killing, using UVF guns. Wright, a powerful figure in Portadown, was the embodiment of militant loyalism. Those loyal to him became known as the Rat Pack and dismissively called the UVF the over-40s club as they challenged its street authority.
As far as I'm concerned, these are a collection of people who are informers, gangsters, drug dealers and thugs, and there's no room for them in our society. Now, what I would like to be saying is, you know, that I would like to be trying to convince them politically that the way forward is through political dialogue. But there's no point in even trying to say that because, you know, I don't recognise these people of having a political thought in their head. All they're interested in and all they're driven by is by making money. And in the meantime, while they're doing that, they're prepared to poison young loyalists.
Wright always denied any drug involvement.
Well, I know of no loyalist that has ever been arrested or questioned in Mid-Ulster in relation to drugs. None whatsoever. And I again invite you to take your cameras into any bars or clubs that you find in this area and freely ask, is there a drug problem?
The roots of the present conflict can be traced to an altercation involving this woman, Muriel Landry, seen here in the cortege at Billy Wright's funeral. At an 11th night bonfire last year, she alleged that Richard Jameson hit her with such ferocity that he knocked her teeth out. His family dismissed it as a minor scuffle, but the RUC did confirm a file had been forwarded to the DPP. The animosity between the two groups reached fever pitch on December the 27th, the second anniversary of the death of Billy Wright, the murdered leader of the LVF. His supporters had gathered at his graveside for a short service. Among those present were LVF prisoners out on Christmas parole. It was supposed to be a show of strength in support of their dead icon. But several hours later, they were totally humiliated, not by Republicans, but by Richard Jameson and the UVF. After the prayer service, a crowd of more than 20 went to a bar at the back of Shamrock Park, the home of Portadown Football Club. Richard Jameson was in the bar, and one version is that he was taunted by an LVF man for hitting Muriel Landry.
I believe what did happen was that there was some words passed between the late Mr. Jameson and another individual in that club in the early part of the afternoon, in which Mr. Jameson was verbally abused and I think jostled to a certain degree.
Bobby Jameson witnessed the aftermath of the fight.
Somebody in the bar phoned to say that these people had hit Richard Jameson, and the next thing I say, within about 20 or 25 minutes, a group of men came with batons, and that's really all I know about it. There was, as I say, a free-for-all in the social club.
And you witnessed it. Was it a vicious fight?
Well, it was certainly, well, it didn't last that long, but it was quite vicious, and as I say, there was chairs and tables, and there seemed to be a lot of blood about, and there was quite a few casualties.
This is home video footage of one of the LVF men who was attacked in the club, supplied by a solicitor who's been instructed to take a criminal injuries claim. The man asked not to be identified. As the pictures show, his thumb was almost severed in the fight. His injuries are consistent with being hit with the club studded with nails. Altogether, 15 LVF supporters were treated in hospital. Many had their fingers broken as they attempted to shield themselves from the blows. One eyewitness said the scene outside the club looked like a medieval battlefield. The LVF said the attack clearly showed what it called the bully boy tactics of the UVF. Less than a fortnight later, Richard Jameson, who was involved in the fight, was dead.
There is a feeling amongst a broad section of the Loyalist community in Portadown that Richard Jameson's murder was a revenge attack which resulted directly out of that attack in Shamrock Park on the 27th of December last year.
People just need to waken up and see them and know what they're at. It's their children and their grandchildren. That this is what they're trying to destroy, and this we need to get them out of. Every town, Portadown isn't the only town. They're all over. They're just creeping in at night to people's lives and just ruining them. It's just an aim for them to go under, really. It just probably protects them in some way that they think they're especially young children who think they're great and would worship them, and you know, around the 14, 15-year-olds would think they were just, but they're only using them. That was just a name for them to go under. It's an insult to call them loyalists, to ordinary loyalist people. It's a total insult.
Do you feel that you can't be killed?
Oh, everyone can be killed there. Everyone. Everyone. I think that would be very hard to justify.
When Billy Wright was alive, his trusted companion was Mark Swinger Fulton, who's serving a 4.5-year sentence in McGabry. He wasn't out on Christmas parole. Bobby Jameson has issued him with a direct challenge.
The LVF, if they had any respect for the late Billy Wright, they should now disband themselves, and we would call on their leader, Swinger Fulton, to disband the LVF, because they're doing no use at all now, and in fact people are coming under their banner and tarnishing the name.
The LVF, as constituted by Billy Wright, says it has no intention of disbanding. It says it was not involved in the Jameson murder and categorically denies allegations of drug dealing. When known LVF supporters have been charged in relation to drugs offences, the cases have been thrown out. The most recent example involved 2 men who formed part of the Guard of Honour at Wright's funeral. Last week they were discharged by a court in California after the judge ruled there was insufficient evidence to proceed. Along with another man, the pair had been charged with possession of marijuana with intent to deal. Back in Portadown, there is little sign of the situation improving. Bobby Jameson says that the vendetta against the family continues. Not only is he himself a target, he says another relative with no political connections had the windows of his flat sprayed with LVF graffiti.
Portadown is extremely tense. There is an air of expectancy about the town. People expect some form of retaliation for the murder of Richard Jameson.
So far, the UVF is supporting the Jamesons' wish to deal with the LVF in a peaceful manner. But doing nothing can sometimes be interpreted as a sign of weakness in the murky world of the paramilitaries. The UVF's political representatives say there is no guarantee everyone will adopt a peaceful stance.
We don't want to see any violence. The difficulty in all of this is that this thing runs so deep that, you know, we don't believe that there won't be violence. I mean, I think that it's inevitable, but we have done what we have always done, and that is that we have said that we prefer to see the community support for the Jamesons to actually make sure that nothing happens. But, I mean, I doubt very much if that is the way it'll go.
The Jameson murder is a crucial test for the UVF. In the face of provocation, can it keep to the democratic principles its representatives have signed up to at Stormont? If the Assembly disappears, so too may the incentive for the UVF to avoid dealing with internal Loyalist disputes in the traditional way.